You're a very good speaker too.
Yeah, you are a good speaker. I was on this podcast with Andrew, but I want to continue watching this reel because it was such a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Where I could finally start letting my opinions reach other people.
Everyone posts this Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Nobody actually cares about that. People want to know what's going on in the market.
We did one video.
There's
There's only one video.
I mean, if a high-rise building came in Niagara-on-the-Lake, I'd probably move out of Niagara-on-the-Lake.
I'm pro-immigration, but I'm not pro you building in my backyard, right?
In my early 20s, I'm like, it's fantastic. Go buy some weed, some alcohol. And I'm not saying people do that.
I like that you pointed to me and
Yeah,
him.
you said
When he said
educated.
some educated, some.
Ricky.
Look at it. I drew this.
You're literally pointing it out. Cannot make it any more clear.
Lovely.
Awesome.
From wine country to cottage country, real estate is all about lifestyle. I'm Andrew Perry, and welcome to That Fine Life.
Welcome back to another episode of That Fine Life podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Perry. This is the show where we find out how to live that fine life by interviewing salespeople, entrepreneurs, influencers now. Is that safe to say? I know.
Wow.
I'm just pulling out the I word.
Yeah.
We've got Cortez and Brooke from the Canadian Real Estate Homefront podcast. I had the, what's
Pleasure.
that word I'm looking at? The honor of being on your podcast. It was a long weekend, Jeez, anyways, we'll get into that. But I had the honor of being on your podcast just a couple of weeks ago. And some of these posts are fucking,
Yeah.
going viral. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it was the way you spoke a little bit. It was everything you said was in a cliffhanger kind of thing. It's what's he going to say?
You're a very good speaker too.
Yeah, you are a good speaker.
Yeah.
So, because some of them go way more viral than others. So I was laughing because I was I was on this podcast with Andrew, but I want to continue watching this reel because it was such a cliffhanger how you were talking.
Very engaging.
Yeah.
When I reviewed them after, I was like, oh, Andrew, he's done this before. So
about this podcast style. So what I like about it, as I was mentioning kind of off air, is that it's all very topical, and I think those are somewhat of the reasons as why, obviously your presentation, the studio, but I think that's kind of might be one of the reasons that contributed to these viral moments. Did you guys always plan on having this podcast being about topical or trendy issues of the day?
yeah, okay, so we when her and I started connecting and talking about stuff, she was like, oh, you have these ideas and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I just kind of, say what I think. And then she got really into it. And then we were going back and forth with stuff.
Yeah.
And the one thing that really separates our podcast right now, I think, is the short form video. That's what we from the beginning, we're we need short form video and we need to figure this out. And there was growing pains, when we started, there was we had no idea what
Cortez
we were doing.
kept it alive. I was ready to
just throw it in. We were just
the
we'll figure it
towel.
out. We'll figure it out. And yeah, I think one of the big things is why it works and why people watch us. Because a lot of people are asking us what are you guys doing differently and stuff like that. We talk about stuff that people are either scared to talk about or not educated to talk about. Just over the weekend, for example, nobody cares about your Labor Day post. Happy Labor Day.
I shared that.
Yeah.
I shared that.
Yeah.
From Eric from Brooke Hicks.
Yeah, it's but it's so true. Everyone posts this Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Nobody actually cares about that. People want to know what's going on in the market.
Yeah.
And it's and if you're not educated on it, if you're just the person that says, oh, the market just goes up on average 6% per year. If you look at a chart, it's that's so boring. No one wants to hear that kind of stuff. But when you came on our pod and you actually had things to say and you were just an open book, that's what people love, and they might hate it too. But at the end of the day,
it's
we
get
views,
our
it's getting
hate
traction.
comments.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I think about the short little snippets of information, because how do you gain trust in the beginning as just a full-on podcast? Who's going to go listen to 45 minutes of two people talking that they don't know or haven't heard before or seen before? So we try to clip our reels into little snippets that give you information on what's happening in the market. Especially this one is very volatile, changing every week. So it almost keeps people up to date and gives them quick information where they don't have to be prepared to listen to that long form if they don't want to, but they can feel like they're being educated by, a couple minutes. And that's what people like to do. Scroll on Instagram and they stop when it's oh, that's interesting. And then they keep going. And if it's longer than 30 seconds, people are like, all right.
Yeah. When they
So what do you think, you know, are you ever worried? You know, you talk about these hateful comments, and trust me, it's the internet. Surprisingly, you know, I don't get a lot of it, but I think it's because I'm kind of usually playing that fine line, maybe subconsciously.
Yeah.
But I think now that my business is in a position to where, you know, I'm not really forcing people to work with me anymore. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm not hounding people on the phones all day. Personally, you know, I'm more of, I put my stuff out there, people come to me. So I feel like I'm in a position now where I could finally start letting my opinions reach other people. So I think, you know, a couple of podcasts before yours, but I think certainly your podcast, I just felt so comfortable sharing it with you guys that it kind of, you know, led me to just say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go off on my opinions and just go. So do you guys ever think about that and be like, what if because I have noticed that you do play both sides. Let's call it a left and a right.
Yeah.
Obviously maybe leaning a little bit more right, maybe if I'm right.
Yeah.
So does that ever cross your mind when you're talking about certain things? Like, because realtors like to play it safe.
Yeah.
That's kind of their thing.
People love to kind of sit on the fence. Like, I don't really think that.
They're scared to be wrong too.
Yeah. And I don't really think that I sit on a side. I think I'm just very data driven and I just talk about data. And to be fair, the people that want to work with me respect me for my opinion on the economy and the real estate market.
Right.
And if they don't, and they're like the hateful people, I don't want to work with them anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I'm attracting the people that I want to work with who actually respect what I have to say, respect my pricing, respect everything like that. So, like, I'm pretty happy just, doing what we're
And
doing.
in terms of the comments, if they're not like crazy, like really mean, if there's somebody that has a completely opposite opinion, I actually will reply back and I'm like, this is good stuff, because I am totally open to be switched in terms of a certain topic. Like, I want somebody to challenge me if I'm so much of, you know, a believer of one thing, and then somebody comments and shares their personal experience when we're talking about immigration or whatever the topic is. I am able to be like, oh, interesting, kind of use that to then further shape my beliefs or whatever my opinion is, I guess. But I think it's the same with you, because I only speak to my experience, and as a realtor, like, what's, you know, set my life up in terms of my houses, what's gotten me to this point in my career. And so that's what's brought me to the point of having these opinions. And I can only give to clients what I know, and that's how I've done it. So
yeah, that's how I built my business, is just like being in the door and being able to explain stuff too. And I also think a lot of this stuff is like conversation. It's like, let's educate people. And, you know, I'm not always right for sure, but I think it's like, even on the immigration thing, like, people come at us all the time about it.
We deleted one video.
There's
only one video we've ever deleted because of how hateful it was.
Yeah.
Really?
Just people saying, like, you know, coming from, you know, white privileged people, all this stuff. Like, both my parents were immigrants. Like, I'm the first gen.
That's what I was going to say. Are you white?
Yeah. I'm tan right now. But anyway, it's just like an unproductive conversation. Like, just because of the color of your skin, you can't talk about immigration policy in Canada. Like, that has nothing to do with anything. Like, you know, every race and every color comes to Canada. It does not matter, you know, exactly like what the color of your skin is if you can have an opinion about something. Obviously, we're just talking about the amount of people coming into Canada versus the amount of homes, the healthcare, and the system that we have. Like, everyone's feeling this. It's not an us versus them issue. It's an everyone issue. So that's kind of like the one thing we get a lot of slack on.
Yeah.
And so when do you think that this whole idea of just talking, I know politics, I mean, there's kind of my answer right there, but when did talking about these kind of things, you know, put you into one category? I mean, I don't understand why we're just having an honest conversation about the housing market and what certain factors play into it. Do you have any ideas when, you know, that kind of started?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's like COVID separated a lot of people, I think. Like, from that moment, I see the biggest switch, and obviously that translates to many different things. Like, it was a huge switch in the global, everything.
Yeah.
But that created two sides, people that were against it and people that were for it. And so the non-vaccinated people versus vaccinated, and two different policies, and then regions against each other, people wanting to be away from people. And I think that started the opposing opinions that led to new policies that some people agreed with and didn't agree with. And it just kind of translated, because I think as a nation, we're more divided than really ever before.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
COVID is a huge factor, and the fact that, the COVID prices, and we're still in that era where we're feeling the ramifications of what happened. I think that people want something to fight for, and want their opinions to be heard. And almost, I think, when you're fighting for what you believe in and there's somebody else fighting you back, that gives you, something that feels good, like something to believe in.
I agree.
I don't think we'll ever see where everybody just agrees and gets along, but like, I think, we're more divided than ever before. And I think the pivot point was 2020, in my opinion, and this is only my experience.
Yeah, it's your experience too. Also, like, even if you look at the news today, right? Like, I don't know if you've been following this international student kind of debacle that they're talking about.
Yes, a
People
little
that
bit, but
So people that don't know, like, the Liberal Party is very much like pro-immigration, which I am too, 100%.
Of course.
But anyways, they kind of let in about 900,000 foreign students. And basically why they let in so many foreign students is these private colleges charge 3x the amount for tuition. So all of a sudden, the Liberal Party, who's been so pro-immigration, all of a sudden you see the housing minister come on and actually talk about, maybe we, and the immigration minister, maybe we actually need to look at these numbers more. And like all of a sudden they create this switch in their ideology, right? So you almost have this, like, at first it was only people who are on the right think that immigration is bad or we're doing too much of it. And all of a sudden you see the left kind of switching tones. I don't really think it's a right versus left thing. It's just like an economics thing in my mind.
Yeah.
It's like you have too many people stressing the system, both socially and economically, and there needs to be a better plan. That's my opinion.
I agree. And it's also, we're 12, 14 months out from an election.
Yeah.
Let's also keep that in
Political theater.
Yeah, exactly. But, I was watching this very interesting, call it like a map, right? This guy on Instagram or TikTok. And he was saying like how Americans compare themselves to Canadians, saying that Canadians, live in the igloos and all that, but there's way more Americans that actually live above where the majority of the Canadians live.
I freak people out when I go to Florida or even like California. Like, we as a Toronto are on the same plane as Northern California. So the majority of the states are north of Toronto. So when we go to like Florida and they're like, oh, I'm from, let's say, Minnesota. I was like, oh, like, how is it up there? Like almost like north of me. And they're like, what do you mean? Or they come to Toronto and I was like, oh, how is it up there? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm from the States. And I'm like, you're north of us. That's a funny stat.
Well, it is. And because the way, and then it got me thinking as to, okay, so if there's so much red tape about building housing, because, I mean, I agree. I want to protect our little towns. They have a quaint prettiness to them because they are the way they are and the way they're structured. I mean, if a high-rise building came in Niagara-on-the-Lake, I'd probably move out of Niagara-on-the-Lake. Right. But on the other hand, I also agree with we need to provide more housing. Yeah. So what's the problem with filling up all of this empty space in Canada and providing more infrastructure in these little towns? Because as of right now, okay, with Greenbelt, how controversial that is, opening up acreage, giving more away, giving your developer buddies, first opportunity, in my opinion is that if we're going to be doing this and bringing in more people, we need to be providing housing. And so why not look outside of the GTA? Okay, jobs, family might already be in existence there. But at the end of the day, how did the states do it?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's more of a capitalistic society. That in my opinion, I think that developers need to be incentivized to build, and they should make a lot of money, straight up. Like, if you think of the company Apple, right? Everybody wants an iPhone. Everyone wants a laptop. No one's complaining about how much money Apple makes.
Yeah.
They're just giving you something that you want.
Or how they get made.
Yeah,
Which is
exactly. Yeah, which is even like, right. You could have Canadians building homes. You could have developers making a lot of money. Who cares? Because at the end of the day, they're providing more supply of rentals.
Exactly.
Like not just like being a homeowner, because like everyone's like, oh, you're a real estate agent, you want to make money off of this. Like no, like some people want to rent. It's like let's have purpose-built rentals. Let's have the federal government
That's right.
working with builders, incentivizing them, giving them cheaper loans and cheaper options. It'll create more jobs. There will be a demand for people to buy these places. I promise you that. So yeah, we need to become, in my opinion, more capitalistic, not just in housing, because that dominates our GDP a little bit too much, in my opinion, but in resources.
Right.
We need to use our natural resources, because I promise you, importing oil from dictatorship countries is not the solution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, and Trump called it when he was, what was it, 4 years ago, or I guess 2.5 years ago, where he said, wait, when did Biden? Yeah, 2.5 years ago, when he said that vote Biden in, you know, the pipelines are going to be shut down.
Yeah.
And Trudeau did the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's just an interesting time where we're cutting off our own people to supply and buy from outside of our own country.
Yeah.
And, but back to the developer thing for a moment is where, you know, look at Volkswagen and look at Lamborghini for an instance. Where I'm almost certain, somebody fact check me, but I'm pretty sure Volkswagen owns Lamborghini now.
Okay.
Right?
I actually don't know that.
Okay. So Volkswagen is a lower price entry level car. Now, to go, and I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. So Volkswagen was an entry level car. They sold way more than Porsche, Volkswagen, Audi, and now they own all of them. So where I'm going with this is that where I don't know how the bylaws get created in each municipality, but they're developing all this land and they're saying, okay, we can only build, a single family dwelling on it. Whereas if they were, guided and motivated to start building purpose-based rentals at higher volumes, the developers would make way more money.
Yeah.
And they can't do that because, especially here in Niagara, nope, there you can't build a duplex. No, you can't build a 4. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't, and that whole thing when putting coach houses in your backyard. Yeah. There's so many restrictions on that too. Yeah. So I think just opening up the conversation a little bit more, and then now look how many projects have halted because as as investors, right? You guys use private money in order to flip the house to get it back, so that you're not on a longer term. Mm-hmm. Developers, they all do that as well. Yeah. And now they're not starting new projects because I'm not 8%, 14% for private money. I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. When,
And even if they were to get investors in on the project, which I think a lot of them did in the past, where it's not necessarily a loan at 8%, but an investor on the future value, you get paid out that way, or you continue on with that developer. The non-Canadian, that new law, it can only be a certain percentage of ownership from outside money. So even if you're an investor in another country, to bring your money here and be an investor in these with these developers, it's not allowed. So you're only, 10%? So essentially, if you have 10 people and you want to get outside money because our money is at 8%, doesn't make sense. You want investors to be actually a part of the project instead of having a loan to pay. Only one out of those 10 can be involved. The minute you have 2, that's they're not able to acquire or just be a part of it. It's what's that one? The corporate.
We talked about it at the beginning. I remember, at the beginning of this year. But
yeah.
I think it's all just it's disingenuous at the end of the day because
Me too.
You have these people in these municipalities who are in the political head of it saying that I'm pro-immigration, but I'm not pro you building in my backyard, right? I'm not pro you building behind my $1.5 million house that I bought 20 years ago. You know what I mean? So it doesn't make sense.
They call them nibs.
Yeah.
Nibs.
Nibbies or something?
Not in my backyard. Yeah.
And then even to the point of what you said before, it's the development charges that are just astronomically high. Like I just hear these development charges are like, even in Ontario, it's like 30% of the final purchase price is due to, getting fees, levies, all these things, all the taxes that they charge. So that just ultimately is going to the consumer at the end of the day, right? So the consumer is paying a 30% markup because the government's in the way. So, make it make sense, I guess, is my final thought there.
It's I don't understand the thought process of how our government works and how they can just step up to podiums and explain how they're helping people, with their $250 grocery rebate. Yeah, it's like, you know what? It's
putting lipstick on a pig.
But it's at this. But how a lot of people buy into it as well is something I don't truly understand. I remember as a kid, I would get like these random checks from the government. In my early 20s, and I'm like, this is fantastic. Go buy some weed, some alcohol. And I'm not saying people do that. I'm just saying, like, as a kid, majority of us, what do we need the money for? Right? So it's just interesting how this whole system gets created, and now it's the investor's problem, the realtor's problem. If they weren't creating bidding wars, this would have never happened. Where they're missing the whole point of supply and demand and the way a market works.
Like, I couldn't agree more. I think free handouts clearly don't work. Look at what happened during COVID. You had the kid coming home from university making $1,500 a month. And now you have the banks, you had all this money printed. Everyone was, so rich. And now all of a sudden you tighten policy, you raise rates, you put pressure on people. And now you have the big six banks who are forced by OFSI to pad in their reserves basically on loan defaults. So they're doubling how much money they have on the side in case something happens, in case people stop paying their credit cards. Loan delinquencies, basically, stop paying their car payments, stop paying their mortgage. That tells you something, right? Because we have an oligopoly system in the banking system where there's not much to choose from. So recently the banks came out with their quarterly report, and they all had more money on their reserves for a rainy day. So, I mean, if that doesn't tell you something, it might help hearing it from me.
Well, I think when I learned about how the banking system works, I mean, obviously I knew wasn't backed by gold. I didn't know that until I was like, 20. Yeah. But right, but then you realize how somebody puts their money into the bank, and then that bank lends that money out, and then when they get a loan, they get it from other banks, and it's just a really weird system that I don't really properly understand it. Yeah. But two, I don't think that anybody ever, the general population, would ever understand it. And so, I think that's kind of a way of how you control, the future of a society where all that funding is just in their hands. Yeah. The only people winning, I mean, I'm not sitting here complaining. Like, I've done really well in real estate, and I will continue to do well in real estate. But for the average person who is not interested in any of that, they're getting hosed right now.
Yeah, that's why the middle class is probably deteriorating a bit in Canada, right?
Yeah, I hear sometimes on TikTok that owning a home in some of these areas that we talk about, especially the GTA, is going to become just a commodity. So there's going to be very much a distinction between renters and homeowners, and it's just going to be like our parents, they all had the ability to buy a house. Like, it's just not possible anymore, and there's going to be more and more of a discrepancy between, like, you're either one or the other, just like literally a commodity. It's something that other people have that's just not in the cards for you. Yeah. Which I hate hearing that, because it's...
Yeah, it depends on what you're good at, in my opinion, and that's where you should focus on. Like, you can rent and be very rich if you know stocks well, or you're renting and you're reinvesting it into a business or something like that. So it doesn't always have to be real estate, in my opinion. It's just money's a game, and you just got to learn what you're good at and try and make more of it. And I'm learning it every day too. Like, I'm still learning myself.
I say in Canada, you cannot get rich on a salary. I don't care if your salary's $800K. You're not getting rich that way. You're, first of all, taxed $400K of it. Yes. And then you're you're just not. And so first of all, who has an $800,000 salary? Not many people. But I mean, the only ways to really grow your money in Canada is through real estate, through stocks, which in my opinion is too volatile for a lot of people, or through building a business. And it's tough to build a business in Canada. Yeah. Starting up a business, you need systems and products, and you need money to start. And so a lot of people that want to build a business, you're starting from scratch. It's not an easy thing to do, and it requires money up front. Yeah. So those are the three real ways to grow your wealth. I mean, like you said, the bank lends out your money that you put in a bank. You're not getting rich on a savings account. You're essentially giving your money to the bank interest free, so they can get rich.
Yeah. So what do you think then where do you think this is all going to go? I mean, everybody has their opinions, some educated, some uneducated.
I like that you pointed to me and
Yeah,
then
you
him
said
when you said
educated.
some educated, some uneducated.
This guy just has an opinion. Yeah.
Certainly not intentional. But I mean, from what I understand is that they're planning on holding at 5 for the next 6 months, maybe 5.5 between the apex between now and 2025, and then things will start slowly going down? Or do you think they'll just pull the plug and be like, hey, look, we're stable now. People can afford this 5% benchmark. We're going to keep it here.
Well, our GDP was in a negative, so we are in a recession, and it's just, what's funny is that people, before a recession happens, all they talk about is we're going to be in a recession, and then we're in a recession, and I haven't even heard that word. But technically,
true.
2 quarters of negative GDP growth is a recession. So we are in a recession. We are going that way. Yeah. So I think monetary policy is working, and just like any data that you ever see, it has to be, it's past, because you can't conclude something without concrete data. So it has to be in the past. So it is coming down, but it just takes a little longer for that to catch up.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I go back and forth. I've been shocked before.
Yeah.
But I am interested to hear what he's going to say at the press release, because I do respect Tiff Macklem as much as there's a lot of hate against him right now. Yeah. I think that he's a very smart person, and he is trying to do the right thing. So what he does, I don't know if it'll be the short-term support that he'll get, but
yeah, I mean, like I'm of the mindset of like this market is going down. Like the housing market is probably going to go down another 10%. In my opinion, I think there's going to be some forced sellers because of these rates. Yeah, and the buyers the buyers aren't there at 6%. Stress tested at 8. Yeah. It's just like it eventually has to come to a time where incomes are not keeping up with housing prices, in my opinion. Right. But with that being said, I'm not expecting a 2008 kind of financial crash. But what I think is that Canada is extraordinarily divided. You're going to have these really wealthy boomers who, did really well on real estate, sold the family home, have money in the bank. And then you have the young Gen Zs and millennials who statistically, we've seen RBC talk about it, aren't keeping up with their parents based off the cost of living. And like, I just go out there right now and try and make a living, try to make $60K and make it work in a big city. It's just not going to happen.
I'm seeing posts all over Facebook. I don't know if you're part of these groups where they're like, I need a place to park my car safely because I'm living in a car. And it's like frequent. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking because it's like, I can't afford $2,500 for a 1-bedroom. Like, it's just not doable is what they're saying. And, they're like, no, we have a van. And that is, as in Canada, we're all about helping the lower class, right? All of these programs that we have, social assistance, disability, free health care. It's all about, social programs to create less desperate situations. Like the state's not free. They don't have free medical care. Yes, they have insurance, but I don't love the fact that they make people so desperate. Desperate people do desperate things, higher crime. Yeah. So Canada talks about, helping them, and then we see people struggling at their absolute probably worst right now.
The biggest thing to me is that the carbon tax is going up. That's still being implemented while the rates just continue to go up too. And there's other things that are, I don't understand how people still don't see that giving people billions and trillions of dollars in these programs, like, where does it come from? It's astonishing that people still don't see and understand that this is what happens. Yeah. This societal, situation, I guess, we've gotten ourselves into is because the way that we, allow these people to kind of control.
We are in such a housing crisis. And like, that's why we have a podcast, and that's why we talk about it. Because it's like, we need to talk about this because there's people living on the streets, like everywhere in Canada. Go to Vancouver, go in Toronto. There's tent cities because they don't have a hope to make this happen. And it doesn't look like there's going to be a hope anytime soon, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you need to be making really good money. You need to have a roommate. You need to have good parents. Like, there's so many factors that not everyone is blessed with or lucky enough to say that they have. So figuring out this housing crisis is like top of mind for us, I think, too. Like, I love talking about it because I think it, brings awareness to a topic that almost gets suppressed too much. Like, it should be our number one issue. And I think it's going to be, because the Conservatives are just leading the polls so much right now. If there's an election today, there's a 98% chance that they're going to win, because Pierre Poilievre has been banging the drum about housing. And young people are saying, yes, this guy understands what I want. I just want a house. I want a roof over my head. And everyone needs a roof over their head. Everyone needs to eat. So when you bring in 900,000 international students or 1 million immigrants, you put pressure on the system that you can't even have the basic necessities to survive because you can't even afford them, which is a roof over your head and some food. So,
and but also what happens, from an immigrant standpoint too, where they think that they're coming to this amazing country that's providing so much opportunity.
We see comments all the time,
right? And they get their paycheck and they're like,
yeah,
I thought I was getting paid $15 an hour.
Yeah.
Where did that go?
Yeah, literally. You come here, and it is safe, and there is amazing things about Canada.
Of course.
But the cost of living will just deteriorate you, right? Especially as a new immigrant. You're just going to come here thinking that, okay, I'm doing the right thing for my family, which, in a safety-wise, school-wise, yes. But then all of a sudden, you realize how expensive it is. You're coming here without any credentials, trying to get an apartment for your family. Everyone's turning you down because landlords have the pick of the litter. And that's not a landlord's fault.
No, of course.
It's just, anyone would do that in their situation, would to be the best candidate with the most information.
Well, of course. I mean, it's just like the banks, any other small loan, you need to be able to provide some proof of history, either employment or credit. And, landlords are going to do the same thing, of course.
It's a fault on the government. You're setting people up for failure, in my opinion.
Well, so let's talk back to the kind of mortgage rates.
Yeah.
How long do you think we're going to be in this? Do you think things are going to go down, or?
I think at least Q2 next year, you might see a little bit more chatter about it. It's hard to say, right? Because we need to follow the U.S. I think that's an important thing, because if we don't follow the U.S., our dollar just gets absolutely deteriorated.
Right.
And they're ahead of us in the rate hiking cycle because their housing market is a lot less sensitive to rate hikes like ours.
Right. Because
they don't protect it. They do have variables, but they have 30-year fixed mortgages. So I think like a high percentage of people are under a 4% interest rate. Versus Canada, we got billions of dollars coming renewed in the next couple of years. So I do think rates are staying higher for longer. There's a reason why the bank is independent of the government, and their number one goal is to get inflation down, which they have been doing. It has been a success. Our GDP is contracting. Our unemployment rate is going up. And I know these things are bad in theory, but they're good for getting inflation down.
Right.
So I think that they're going to pause tomorrow. That's my opinion, just based off the latest GDP report. But I think that these rates are going to stay higher for longer. We'll see it ripple through the housing market, and we're going to be in a slow year, I think.
And if we didn't do this, where do you think prices would have gone? Like, continued?
For sure. As you pour more fuel on the fire, I think it only gets worse. And I think that COVID was a terrible experiment. Dropping rates that low was terrible to do. And we went up 52% in 2 years on leveraged assets. Like, that's not a good thing.
Well, in some areas they went up 100%.
Yeah. So I think if, obviously we'll never know, but I think that the market would be, close to 2019 prices right now if there wasn't that blip where money was so cheap.
Yeah. So do you think if we wait long enough and the rates maybe slowly climb, maybe they reach their apex, do you think, and people start losing their house, like, do you think this is going to bring the real estate market so far down that it almost doesn't, make sense for the average person to get into a new home or something like that?
I think there's not enough people in terms of like a percentage wise that are in the position where they're struggling so much. And that it is all we talk about because it's kind of our age group and we want to help them. And that's who we kind of are able to target and talk to. But like we've said, the amount of people that own their homes outright or the people that, are renting or didn't buy at the peak that have equity in their houses that could essentially use that equity, go to a smaller place or whatever the case may be. I don't think it's going to be too big of a crazy ripple effect. It's just, it is a small percentage of the people that bought in COVID on a variable and are absolutely struggling so much that they might be out of their house. There's so much of the population, 30-something% that just owns their home outright.
Yeah, 1/3 of people,
Take a third out, and then another third is renters, okay? Take those out. So then there's a third that owns, and then out of that 33%, tons of people bought before 2020 to now. It is a small, right? Or even 2020 to 2021. Like after that, things started calming down a little bit in terms of your purchase price.
It is.
So that's a good way to thank you for that, because that's a good.
The percentage isn't high enough for it to be like a Canada-wide.
I do think though that there is the investor class, right? That is feeling a lot of pain. Like I worked with people this year who had investment properties and they couldn't hold on anymore. The only thing that made it make sense though was that they could sell, either break even or make a little bit of money, because the market is still good because inventory is so low. So if that does change though, if inventory starts getting a lot higher than sales, and you have a lot of people that are flooding the market with these Toronto condos. Like I know Tom Story, he's a big Toronto condo guy. He was talking that they've helped a lot of people offload their investment properties. That's the only kind of inventory I can see kind of coming to market.
Investors that wanted to be an investor during those rates where everything looked like it cash flowed and it just seemed so simple. But at the end of the day, the change in purchase price isn't going to be too crazy. If you bought for 900, okay, maybe it's worth 800 now, let's say. Your down payment on 900 was 180, right? So you're losing a big chunk of your down payment, selling off at a loss. Like you just got to say goodbye to that 80 grand or whatever. Like that sucks, but start again. It's not necessarily like, because it is the down payment that you're going to lose. Your mortgage obviously isn't 900.
Right.
Yeah.
Your mortgage is 720, and if you sell for 800 but you bought for 900, you're getting some of your down payment back. You got to say goodbye to it. So it's not like the most horrible thing in the world. I'm telling my seller, you might lose some of your down payment. That's it, because we're worth less than what you bought it for. You can't hold on. You're going to say goodbye to 40 grand and you're going to carry on. You're going to make that 40 grand in a future investment.
Or if you can rent it out, you can rent it out. But if you can't hold the payments, then
you say goodbye to a portion of your down payment. But it's not putting you in so much debt, because every investment did have 20% down and it hasn't fallen that much.
Could
realistically.
Because some areas feel it more than others.
Yeah.
For sure. I don't think it's just like a blanket statement to say that everywhere in Canada is going to go down 10%. I think that some areas will feel it more than others. Like, especially the COVID darlings, they've already felt it, right? Like, I think London, St. Thomas is down 25-30%. Like, if you bought at the peak and you're down 30%, like, you're not going anywhere anytime soon. Like, because
then you'd have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah. You're at a negative loan to value.
Yeah. And I would, wonder what some of those penalties look like as well, right?
To get out of a 5-year fixed is thousands of dollars, tens of thousands.
My first mortgage I had to break was $17,000.
And that's why people take variables, because they're 3 months interest. It's a lot more liquid. So, everyone who took a variable.
3 months interest right now could be 17 grand.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, you're actually right. Yeah.
That's true.
You're not wrong. Yeah. But also, to speak just real quickly on the housing thing, banks are working with people to extend their amortizations. I think that's artificially inflating the market. If it was a true free market, there'd be a lot more forced sellers, and we would already, this 10% I'm talking about would have already happened.
That's what I was thinking as well. Because at the end of the day, if there's going to be so much, because 10% could be a big hit to somebody's portfolio, right? Sure. Including a bank. Yeah. So the bank's going to try, you'd think or hope, to keep them, but it's always only going to work out for them.
It's almost like it's almost like Tiff Macklin isn't raising the rates for some people. They're just extending their amortization.
Right.
It doesn't even make sense. Like on Twitter, I'm seeing 70, 80 years. Like, you'll be dead by the time. Like, it shouldn't be allowed, but
you'll never get that back.
I don't have the power to make that decision, but
but in the States, I think because they have those 30-year terms, because the average person, Ricky, what's his last name? He's gonna kill me. So I tried to invite him on the podcast too. He's like an American kind of, similar to you guys, right? And where he's saying the average person lives in their home in America for about 16 years.
Wow.
For some reason, I feel that's much lower in Canada.
It's 5.
It's 5. See, because in my personal business, I got clients that are moving almost every 3 years.
You know, truthfully, why I think that happens is because most of it is stepping stones in Canada. Because like in the States, like the house prices are half. It's like, why would you not just go right for that detached house?
Right.
In Canada, you have to go condo. Okay, hopefully I build up equity. Hopefully it appreciates. Yeah. Then I'm going to a townhouse. And then, when I'm in my 40s, I'm finally going to get that detached house. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Like think of what they build now. They build 500 square foot boxes and all over Toronto. But now it's coming to the suburbs. Like look at North Oakville now. Look at Burlington.
North Oakville doesn't even look like Oakville anymore.
Yeah. It's South Milton.
I grew up in Oakville, and I love Oakville, but I don't want to live there. It just feels too like
it's condensed.
Yeah, it's very condensed now. Yeah.
We were driving home from the cottage on the weekend. We had to stop off in Burlington to use the bathroom, and getting back onto the QEW was dead stop for like 4 hours. Yeah. And this is not coming home on the Monday. We came home on Sunday morning.
Everybody had the same thought as you.
Yeah, and it was just like, what the heck?
Traffic.
And then we're driving through Burlington. I'm like,
I live in Toronto, so this weekend you had the CNE, you had the air show, you had concerts at Budweiser Stage. There's literally a rave out front in Fort York Park. I went for a walk and there's a full rave, like full DJ in this park. But there's people everywhere in the if you take the Gardiner into Toronto,
if it's open,
and like you pass Lakeshore exit, it's 3 lanes. There's 3 lanes.
That's the thing about building more houses in these municipalities. I heard one of the mayors of, I think it was Waterloo, speak about changing the zoning provisions from single family to more, and she's like, okay, but that's going to force us to raise people's property tax, because if I'm bringing in all these more people because the zoning laws allow for more people per dwelling, I need to increase the infrastructure. I need to build community centers. I need to build more highways. I need to build more throughways, more stores, whatever the case may be. So sure, but we're going to raise people's property taxes, and then people don't like that either. So it'd be funny to even draw like a whole loop of like what one thing leads to the other, because there's consistent roadblocks to get us to where we need to go, and we're not.
Somebody should show that to the federal government.
Here, look at it. I drew this.
You're literally pointing it out. Cannot make it any more clear. But yeah, that's about it, guys. I appreciate you coming on and being candid with us and my audience. That's great. Of course, yeah. So where can our audience find you guys?
I'm just on social media, like at Cortez Ranieri.
I am at Brooke K Hicks, middle initial K.
But yeah, if you want to follow our podcast, we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, just at Canadian Real Estate Homefront. And then our short clips are on TikTok and Instagram. That's where we get the most views and the most traction. Canadian Real Estate Homefront there too.
Yeah. Apparently, mine on TikTok got like 150,000.
200 almost.
200?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
That was a good
video. Did you guys tag me on that one?
Yeah.
But thanks, guys, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. We're honored to be here.
Great.
Thanks again.
Okay, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that crap. But most importantly, don't forget to write us a review, as that helps get our podcast, higher up in the algorithm so more people can enjoy the show. So thank you.